news out of Hollywood. After 12 years together and 6 children, Angelina Jolie is filing for divorce from Brad Pitt.
After a decade of lawyers, sealed documents, and carefully worded statements, Angelina Jolie has finally broken her silence about what really ended her marriage to Brad Pitt. And no, it's not just about that infamous plane incident everyone's been talking about. What she's revealed goes much deeper, painting a picture that's far more complex than the tabloid headlines ever captured. For 10 years, we've been fed bits and pieces, leaked court documents, and anonymous sources. But this time, it's coming directly from Angelina herself, and the timing couldn't be more significant. The custody battle is finally settling, the kids are growing up, and it seems she's ready to set the record straight. So, what exactly did she say? And more importantly, why did one of Hollywood's most powerful couples really fall apart? The answer might surprise you, because it turns out their split wasn't about one dramatic moment. It was about something that had been building for years. Let's dive into the real story behind Brangelina's collapse. The golden years, how it all began. Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie didn't just meet on a movie set, they collided on one. The year was 2004, and the film was Mr. and Mrs. Smith, a spy thriller about a married couple who are secretly assassins hired to eliminate each other. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, especially considering Brad was still married to America's sweetheart, Jennifer Aniston, at the time. From day one, the chemistry between Brad and Angelina was undeniable. Crew members later described watching them work together as electric, almost uncomfortable to witness. These weren't two actors playing roles. This was something real unfolding in front of cameras and witnesses. By the time filming wrapped in late 2004, Brad's marriage to Jennifer was already showing cracks. They separated in January 2005, and just months later, paparazzi captured Brad and Angelina playing with her adopted son Maddox on a beach in Kenya. The world went absolutely insane. Team Aniston versus Team Jolie became a cultural phenomenon, with tabloids selling millions of copies dissecting every photo, every statement, every carefully chosen word. But here's what made Brangelina different from every other celebrity scandal. They didn't just become a couple. They became a movement. Between 2005 and 2006, they adopted Zahara from Ethiopia and welcomed their biological daughter Shiloh in Namibia, selling the baby photos for millions that they donated to charity. Then came Pax from Vietnam in 2007, and twins Knox and Vivian in 2008. 6 kids, 3 continents, and a humanitarian mission that took them from refugee camps to UN meetings. Brad completely transformed his image from Hollywood heartthrob to dedicated father and activist, often crediting Angelina for showing him a life with real meaning. They weren't just famous, they were important, using their platform for causes that actually mattered. UNHCR, education initiatives, conservation projects. The cynics said it was all PR, but the receipts showed otherwise. They put their money and time where their mouths were. For nearly a decade, they didn't get married, claiming they wouldn't until everyone could legally marry. But in 2014, they finally tied the knot at Chateau Miraval, their estate in the French countryside. The ceremony was intimate and deeply personal, with their children involved in every aspect. Shiloh and Pax walked Angelina down the aisle, while Zahara and Vivienne served as flower girls. The twins even helped bake the wedding cake. Angelina wore a veil decorated with her children's drawings, a detail that melted hearts worldwide. This wasn't a Hollywood production. This was a family coming together. Brad later said, choosing Angelina as the mother of his children was the smartest thing he ever did. She called him her best friend and greatest support. Every interview, Every red carpet appearance reinforced the same image of partnership, passion, and purpose. They seemed untouchable, bulletproof against the forces that destroyed other celebrity marriages. Except they weren't. Cracks in the foundation. Looking back, the warning signs were there if you knew where to look. In 2013, Angelina underwent a preventive double mastectomy after discovering she carried the BRCA1 gene mutation. Brad was publicly supportive, calling her heroic and praising her courage. But friends later suggested the experience was more complicated than it appeared, creating emotional distance neither of them knew how to bridge. Then came 2015's By the Sea, a film they made together about a couple whose marriage is falling apart. Angelina wrote and directed it, casting Brad as her emotionally distant husband. Critics panned it, and audiences stayed away in droves. But the real story was happening off-camera. Multiple sources described tension on set, with the couple barely speaking between takes. Angelina later admitted the film was therapeutic, a way to explore difficult emotions in their relationship. Translation: they were already struggling, and everyone missed it because they were too focused on the glamour. Parenting became a particular point of conflict. Angelina took a hands-on, intensive approach with the kids, homeschooling them while they traveled for her work. Brad, according to sources close to the family, felt increasingly sidelined in decisions about their upbringing. He wanted more structure, more normalcy. She prioritized experiences and education through exposure to different cultures and global issues. Neither approach was wrong, but they were fundamentally incompatible. Then there was Brad's drinking. He's since admitted in multiple interviews that his alcohol consumption during this period was problematic, using booze to numb emotions he didn't know how to process. Friends described him as checked out, physically present, but emotionally absent. For someone like Angelina, who'd grown up with a father struggling with similar issues, this was triggering in ways Brad probably didn't fully understand. The incident that changed everything. September 14, 2016. A private plane carrying the Jolie Pitt family from France to Los Angeles became the setting for an incident that would destroy their marriage and dominate headlines for years. Details remain disputed, with different accounts offering varying levels of severity. What we know for certain is that an altercation occurred between Brad and Maddox, then 15 years old, with Angelina intervening. The FBI investigated allegations of physical and verbal confrontation, but ultimately declined to press charges. Child Protective Services also got involved, conducting their own review. By September 19th, just 5 days later, Angelina had filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences and requesting sole physical custody of all 6 children. The speed of her decision told you everything. This wasn't a heat-of-the-moment reaction. This was a mother making a choice she'd probably been contemplating for a while, finally pushed to action by an event she deemed the final straw. Brad's team immediately went into damage control mode, with sources claiming he never harmed any of the children and was cooperating fully with authorities. Angelina's camp stayed mostly silent, letting the legal filings and custody requests speak for themselves. The media had a field day, dissecting flight logs, interviewing anonymous witnesses, and creating dramatic reenactments based on speculation. Team Aniston supporters saw it as karma finally catching up to Brad. Angelina's defenders positioned her as a protective mother doing what was necessary. The truth, as always, was more complicated than any single narrative could capture. What followed was one of the messiest, most expensive divorce battles in Hollywood history. Temporary custody agreements gave Brad limited supervised visitation. The kids began therapy. Lawyers racked up millions in fees. And through it all, both Brad and Angelina maintained public silence about the specifics, speaking only through carefully crafted statements, about prioritizing their children's well-being. The investigation cleared Brad of criminal wrongdoing, but the damage to his relationship with his kids, particularly Maddox and Pax, was already done. Brad later admitted to GQ that he'd behaved in ways he wasn't proud of, taking full responsibility for his drinking and emotional volatility. He started attending Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, working with a therapist, and completely changing his lifestyle. But acknowledgement and amends are two different things, and some wounds don't heal just because someone says they're sorry. The truth Angelina finally revealed. For years, Angelina deflected questions about the divorce with variations of the same response. She separated for the well-being of her family. She couldn't discuss ongoing legal matters. She hoped for peace and healing. Polite, diplomatic, and ultimately unsatisfying for everyone desperate to understand what really happened. But recently, that wall of privacy began cracking. In interviews conducted as the legal battles finally wound down, Angelina started speaking more openly. And what she revealed reframed the entire narrative we'd been sold. First, she confirmed that the plane incident wasn't an isolated explosion of temper. It was the culmination of a pattern she'd been witnessing and trying to manage for months, possibly years. She described feeling increasingly concerned about the environment her children were growing up in, watching behaviors that reminded her of her own childhood trauma. This wasn't about one bad day or one mistake. This was about fundamental questions of safety, stability, and what kind of home she wanted for her kids. She chose her words carefully, never directly attacking Brad, but making it clear this wasn't a decision made lightly or impulsively. Second, she addressed something rarely discussed in celebrity divorces: the complete incompatibility of their life visions moving forward. Brad, she suggested, wanted a more traditional family structure. Something settled, rooted, normal. Angelina's life has never been normal, and she had no intention of changing that for anyone. She's someone who takes her kids to refugee camps, who prioritizes humanitarian work over red carpets, who sees education as something that happens in the world rather than in classrooms. Brad initially embraced this lifestyle, but somewhere along the way, he started resenting it. He wanted weekends at home, not weekends in Cambodia. He wanted birthday parties with neighbors, not diplomatic functions with NGO representatives. Neither vision was wrong, but they were heading in completely opposite directions. Third, and perhaps most significantly, she talked about emotional safety. Not just physical safety, though that was part of it, but the kind of environment where her children could grow up without walking on eggshells, without managing a parent's moods, without taking on adult responsibilities they shouldn't have to carry. She'd lived that childhood herself with John Voight, and she refused to let history repeat itself with her own kids. This revelation hit differently because it wasn't about blame. It was about breaking cycles of dysfunction that run through generations if someone doesn't have the courage to stop them. Angelina also addressed why she's speaking now, after a decade of relative silence. The custody battle is essentially over. The kids are older, some even adults making their own choices about relationships with their father. The court proceedings have mostly concluded. She's not bound by the same legal constraints or protective instincts that kept her quiet before. But more than that, she seems to have reached a place of peace with her decision. There's no bitterness in her voice when she discusses it. No need to convince anyone she made the right choice. She knows she did. And that certainty is something no amount of public opinion can shake. The aftermath and consequences. The impact on the children became the most heartbreaking aspect of the entire situation. Maddox, who was directly involved in the plane incident, reportedly hasn't spoken to Brad in years. When he turned 18, he had the legal right to refuse visitation, and according to sources, he exercised it. Pax, the second oldest, has been equally distant, occasionally making his feelings known through social media posts that were quickly deleted, but not before being screenshot and analyzed by the internet. The younger children found themselves in an impossible position, loving both parents, but caught in a conflict they never asked to be part of. Shiloh's decision to legally drop Pitt from her surname when she turned 18 made headlines worldwide, seen by many as a definitive statement about where her loyalties lay. Whether that's the full story or a more complicated truth about identity and autonomy remains known only to her. The twins, Knox and Vivienne, have largely stayed out of the public eye, protected by both parents from the worst of the media scrutiny. But therapists and child psychologists who've commented on the situation generally agree that high-conflict divorces like this one leave lasting marks, no matter how much money or resources are available for treatment. Brad's attempts at reconciliation have been well documented, at least from his side. He's given interviews about his sobriety journey, his therapy work, his regrets about how he handled his marriage and fatherhood. He's acknowledged failures and expressed hope for rebuilt relationships with his kids. But acknowledgement alone doesn't erase years of hurt or instantly restore trust. Some of his children have reportedly been receptive to reconnecting. Others have made it clear they're not interested, at least not yet. The one thing everyone agrees on is that this isn't something that can be rushed or forced. Meanwhile, the Chateau Miraval situation added a whole other layer of conflict to an already complicated divorce. The French estate, where they got married, became the site of a vicious legal battle over Angelina's decision to sell her stake in their joint wine business to the Stoli Group without Brad's approval. Brad sued, claiming she violated their agreement and did it specifically to spite him. Angelina countersued, alleging Brad tried to force her into signing an unreasonable non-disclosure agreement as a condition of the sale. The lawsuit revealed ugly details about their relationship, their business dealings, and just how far trust between them had deteriorated. This wasn't just about money or wine. It was about power, control, and the complete breakdown of any remaining goodwill. Where they are now. Today, Brad and Angelina exist in completely separate orbits that occasionally intersect only through lawyers and court-mandated communications about their children. Brad has moved on romantically with jewelry designer Inez de Ramon, keeping the relationship relatively private compared to his previous high-profile romances. He continues acting, producing, and building his business empire, which now includes everything from a skincare line to architectural projects. By most accounts, he's healthier and more stable than he was during the final years of his marriage, genuinely committed to the personal work required to maintain his sobriety and emotional well-being. Angelina has focused intensely on her children and her humanitarian work, taking on fewer acting roles and more advocacy positions. She's spoken at the UN, launched initiatives for refugee education, and used her platform to highlight causes that mainstream media often ignores. Her children frequently accompany her to events, presenting a united front that speaks volumes about where their loyalties ultimately landed. She hasn't publicly dated anyone seriously since the divorce, though whether that's by choice or simply because she's kept it private remains unclear. The contrast with Brad's relationship with Jennifer Aniston is stark and frequently noted. Brad and Jennifer have maintained a friendly connection, showing up at each other's parties, exchanging warm greetings at awards shows, and generally behaving like mature adults who once loved each other and now wish each other well. The fact that Brad can achieve that kind of post-divorce harmony with one ex-wife, but not the other, tells you everything about the different nature of those relationships and how they ended. Some breakups allow for friendship afterward. Others don't, and no amount of time or therapy will change that fundamental incompatibility. What this teaches us. The Brangelina divorce offers lessons that extend far beyond celebrity gossip. It demonstrates how two people can genuinely love each other, build a family together, and still reach a point where staying together causes more harm than separating. It shows how public perception rarely matches private reality, and how the stories we tell ourselves about other people's relationships are usually simplified versions of much more complex truths. It reminds us that money, fame, and resources don't protect anyone from the fundamental challenges of maintaining a healthy partnership when core values diverge. Perhaps most importantly, it highlights the courage required to leave a situation that looks perfect from the outside but feels dysfunctional from the inside. Angelina faced massive public criticism for ending her marriage, with many people questioning her motives and defending Brad. She weathered accusations of being vindictive, controlling, and using her children as weapons. But she stood firm in her decision, prioritizing what she believed was right for her family over what would make her look good to strangers. That's not easy, especially when you're one of the most famous women in the world. The public's continued fascination with this story, even 10 years later, speaks to something deeper than celebrity worship. We're drawn to love stories, especially tragic ones, because they help us process our own experiences with heartbreak and disappointment. Brangelina represented something aspirational, a partnership that combined passion, purpose, and family in ways most people only dream about. Watching it fall apart forced everyone to confront the reality that no relationship is immune to fundamental incompatibilities, no matter how perfect it appears. After 10 years of speculation, leaked documents, and carefully managed public statements, Angelina Jolie's confirmation about why she divorced Brad Pitt gives us something we rarely get in celebrity breakups: the actual truth, unfiltered by publicists or legal teams. She left because staying felt unsafe for her children. She left because their visions for the future no longer aligned. She left because she recognized patterns she refused to perpetuate. These aren't the dramatic, scandalous reasons tabloids prefer. They're the honest, complicated truths that most divorces are actually built on. The three key takeaways are simple but profound. First, one incident rarely destroys a marriage. It's usually the final straw in a pile that's been growing for years. Second, love alone isn't enough when fundamental values and parenting philosophies diverge. And third, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from something that looks perfect to everyone else but feels broken to you. Questions remain, of course. Will Brad ever fully reconcile with all his children? Will Angelina ever speak even more openly about what happened? Will the Miraval lawsuit ever actually conclude? Time will tell. But what we know now is enough to understand that this wasn't a villain and victim story. It was a tragedy of two people who tried to build something beautiful together and ultimately couldn't overcome the fundamental differences that pulled them apart. So what do you think? Was Angelina right to leave? Could they have made it work with more effort? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the stories behind Hollywood's biggest headlines. Because sometimes the truth is more complicated and more interesting than any tabloid could ever capture.